But parents need to start being more realistic with their kids and telling them that whatever you do, somebody's going to say something. But it's up to you and whether you allow what they say to have control over what you do and how you feel.
Welcome to Fatherhood Voices, breaking the toxic cycle. Dive in as real dads bear all, the mess-ups, make-ups, and every heartfelt moment in between. It's raw, it's real, and it might just change the way you see family.
Welcome to episode 63 of Fatherhood Voices, and here today with my sidekick chick daughter. I gotta stop saying that. Sidekick
I think
chick.
you were saying.
So, and if you sound like a little bit of a frog today, it's because you're getting over a cold,
frog?
right?
I don't sound like a frog.
No?
But yes, if I sound a little raspy, it's because I am getting over a cold. So I'm.
Or a little muffled?
Yes.
You know, it's funny because you asked me for some tea and some raw honey. Not tea, raw honey. But it was funny that you couldn't keep it in your mouth and instead it just freaking drizzled all over the carpet.
No, I didn't expect you to just give me the spoon right away. And then I was like, oh my gosh, you just gave me a spoon. Like, I thought you were going to give me the spoon to do it. And then also, I'm not used to the honey having the raw pieces in it. It's unfiltered.
Well, yeah, because it's
is
raw.
Better, but
like the podcast, raw and
no.
unedited.
Okay.
But today we're on a different track. So
yes.
we'll continue our conversation with bullying today. And we're going to keep the camera rolling regardless of what happens.
Yes.
And, you know, we're both passionate about this subject and we're going to minimize the arguments. And, well, if you feel you need to speak your truth, speak your truth.
Don't worry. I'll take it back this time. We won't glaze over. So, yes, fully speaking the truth.
You know, last week's episode, we started to dabble into something that's very passionate for both of us, and that's bullying. And bullying, how it showed up for me in 8th grade, and then how it showed up for you in preschool, elementary, junior high school. Fuck. Dude.
My whole life.
Your whole life. And then you created a whole concept called the throne. What did you call it? The bathroom sanctuary. The bathroom sanctuary. And then just having conversations about also your sisters being bullied and you not being aware of it because you were so self-consumed in your own teenage life, which is nothing wrong with it, but you were just being you and not realizing that your sisters were experiencing a lot of, you know, what you went through in your early, adolescent. So, you know, in preparing for the topic over the last week, I think we've triggered each other a lot because we've been sending each other videos about kids that have committed suicide and because of social media bullying and just bullying at school, bullying on the playground. It's serious. It's serious out there. And this is why we wanted to make sure that we had a part 2 because we did cover the early stages of bullying, but we kind of really didn't go into junior high school and high school. And I think that's an important topic to really dive into because the way you handle things in junior high school and high school are going to be very different than how you handle them in preschool or elementary school.
Very true.
You know, and, you know, excited to get your perspective. You know, I'm always quick to just punch him in the nose, even if you break your hand. But hey, but we're not going to go there on this podcast. But so, you know, we've gone back, we've shared videos the last week, and what's come up for you as you've started to see these tragedies that have happened with bullying all across not only the United States, but across the globe?
So the things that have really come up for me is just, it's heartbreaking. It's broke my heart. And after that, after I feel that sadness, that heartbreak, it's anger. It's anger as to what happened. Why wasn't anything done about this? I don't understand, you know, where was the school in this? And where were the parents in this? And I don't think that it's necessarily the parents to blame because time and time again, unfortunately, it comes out that it's actually the schools that weren't involved enough. So it's invoked a lot of different feelings and a lot of just anger over the fact that this is happening and that kids are getting younger and younger and committing suicide. And it's also invoked a lot of feelings from when I was younger or in that age when I was being bullied. And thank goodness it was never at that extreme for myself, but it's really made me reflect on what is actually going on in the schools.
You know, something that's come up as I've been doing tons of research on this is there's such thing called as a culturism of bullying that happens in the schools. It's almost like a culture of bullying. bullying. Bullying does exist because there's no one-stop shop uniformed approach to bullying. And it's a culture that the school sets up because most of the bullying happens at school because this is where kids spend most of their day, 6 to 8 hours a day in school. But it's that culture of how the individual school sites, how they create the culture around bullying. Are they zero tolerance, or are they more tend to push it back on the parents that this is something that has to be handled off campus? And I didn't realize that, but the school place is a big part of how bullying is going to show up in your children's lives.
Oh, I think that's absolutely. Okay, I lost my train of thought. I think that absolutely is a reflection that how. Wait, hold on. My words are jumbled.
No, it's okay. I know
Sick
you
brain.
can. No, sick
Wait,
brain,
um,
bog brain,
that's not
dodo
right.
brain,
That's not. Um,
bullying.
this brings up something that I thought about today because I've been doing my own research as well. It's that isn't it funny how the schools, they're so concerned about their attendance, right? Which is with
Money.
public funding came, so it has to do with their funding, right? They're so invested in their standardized testing. And this is very big for
Money.
middle school, high school. And they're very, they're big about their sports reputation, right? What are the three main things that a school is concerned about? That maybe not the main priorities, but those are some of the biggest things. But what about bullying? Because when you have children that are being bullied and when you have a culture, those children aren't going to be paying attention. So if you have low test scores, well, what's going on in your culture? If you're not performing well in sports, well, what's going on in your culture of the self-esteem of the students? If you have low attendance, what's going on in the culture of the students? Do they want to come to school? Are they ditching because what are their purposes there other than they're being subjective to bullying, or maybe there's no self-confidence? Because even teachers can be bullies. So going back to that culture, if the teachers aren't doing anything about it, but you do see all the time teachers that are bullies as well. And I'm not saying that they all are, but it has started to come out more with social media that teachers can be bullies, not just students. So what are the schools actually paying attention to, and why is there not more investigation in the culture?
It's funny you bring that up because I was just having a talk with your grandmother yesterday. My mother, your grandmother, at a one of your cousin's birthday parties, and we're sitting down at the table and was talking to her and your aunt, and she was talking about the podcast, last week's podcast about bullying. And then she said, "Remember when you were going to get expelled from school in 7th grade?" And I said, "Yeah." So, yeah, some kids started to bully you, and then you told the teacher instead. He jumped in and participated also. So you grabbed a bat and you tried to hit the teacher.
Oh,
Yeah, so true story really happened. Piece of shit teacher bullied me. He jumped on the bandwagon with the kids. And at that point, I just reached a point where I guess in that moment, it was like, it's do or die. Like, you're allowing these students to bully me, and now you're going to jump in and participate in it? I grabbed that motherfucking bat and I was going to beat the fucking crap out of him. Absolutely, I was. I actually got suspended for attempting an assault on the teacher. And, luckily your grandma was a little firecracker about this. So came in and she fought to keep me from not getting expelled. But, and I believe it was just a series of events that happened, but it was, the teacher was a bully also. So it wasn't just a small group of students, but it was him that participated in it also. So maybe he thought it was funny. Maybe he thought, I don't know what was going through his convoluted freaking mind, but he had become a bully too. And at that moment I snapped. So absolutely, it's a big part of the culture, not only the school, but in the individual classrooms and how the teachers interact with it. Are they just so quick to dismiss it, or do they take a stronger approach to it to try to nip it in the bud? Or do they just say, this isn't my problem, this isn't a classroom problem, this is a school problem? And the school says, this isn't a school problem, this is a community problem, and so forth and so forth. Everybody's still quick to deflect. But what spills over, what starts in the classroom spills onto the playground and into the lunch. And it eventually spills out into the neighborhoods, and then it spills out into the community.
Well, the power of social media. So definitely, I grew up in a time where when I was in middle school, I think Facebook, we'll say Facebook was barely starting to come out, but by the time that I was in high school, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, those type of things, social media was very much a big part in my upbringing through high school. And yeah, I'll tell you firsthand, bullying follows you home.
I was reading an article about a 14-year-old that actually was on social media. It was a video where they interviewed the mom, and they were planning for her birthday party. She had left school because of bullying, and this is when what was the first one of the first social media apps?
Is
Um,
it MySpace?
MySpace.
Okay.
MySpace. Her parents didn't allow her to have it, but she's like, "Look, I'm at a new school now. Can I have a MySpace account to connect with the old friends that didn't bully me and the new ones?" Pretty soon what happened is somebody pretended to be some boy, and the mom was actively involved in it. She allowed her to follow him. Anyways, what happened, it turned out to be the parent of one of her bullies, and she thought that the parent had thought that this little girl was making fun of her daughter. So she created this persona profile of a boy, a cute little boy, and then reeled her in, and then basically said like, "Oh, we hate you. We all hate you." Got some other MySpace people to jump on
Oh
board.
my
Long
God.
story short, she committed suicide the night before her birthday.
I
Yeah,
hope they locked that woman up
I know.
because the deranged parent deserves to be locked up.
But that's the power of social media. When I was in school, it was notes. You're a fucking asshole. You smell. So pass it on, pass it on. Now it's a click of a button, and man, you got the whole city, the whole freaking county that knows what's going on. But yeah, the power of the influence of social media. You know,
Well, so you actually reminded me with social media. So when I was in high school, we did have a bit of a scandal in our school because there was somebody who was named our school name. Do you remember this? Because remember, you
it's
even
coming.
got involved. Okay, because I just recently remembered this. When I was in high school, there was somebody who created an account called Victor Valley, and they decided they wanted to be like some type of gossip girl type of person. That's kind of what it reminded me of. And they wanted to start putting gossip out there. So, but what ended up happening is this person would just made a Facebook account, called themselves Victor Valley. It was obvious that they were somebody who went to our school because of the people that were being named on there. Well, what happened was myself and my friends ended up being a topic on one of their gossip posts. And I remember telling you that that was happening and you got involved. And what actually happened is I'm glad that the school actually did get involved or the teachers did get involved because the
Well, I got the
teachers.
sheriffs involved
Oh,
too.
you got the sheriff's. Well,
I
that's
got the
what it was.
sheriffs
Okay.
involved.
See, I couldn't
Absolutely.
remember. And I remember we had some great teachers at that point, some very caring teachers, because I remember my geometry, algebra, she was a very well-known teacher. She got involved and talked to every one of her periods and said this, basically talking about how distasteful that the behavior was. And she was upset and saying that the person needed to come up for and what a coward and just basically, saying a different things in a more graceful and elegant type of way, even though she did show that she was upset. And I believe that we had another teacher as well that I remember being talked to because it became such a big thing.
Remember that? That was a big thing. But I also remember that it was shut down within like about a week or two.
It was.
Like it got nipped in the bud.
Thank
And that's
goodness.
that was the power of being able to. They had a culture where they were more lenient. We were more leaning towards zero tolerance when it came to bullying because of so many episodes that had happened that they were quick to try to nip it in the bud.
No, I also think because we had suicides at our school. I can't specifically remember, but I do remember that there were suicides of
Right.
at least a couple of students that happened during my time there.
As we talk about this topic, I know it's very controversial because on one hand, as a parent, you want to get involved, and then you have your children that are like, no, you're going to make things worse. So they're always afraid of you adding fuel to the fire, and then it's going to intensify and so forth. And I thought about something that I want to put out there, and I think this is going to help parents or even people that are maybe getting bullied that are in high school. But I'm going to oppose this towards a parent that has children in high school. Or even no. And let me change that. What advice would you give yourself on bullying in the past? Like now going through it If you could go back, what advice would you give to yourself on how to handle it, or how to dabble with it with your parents or schools, knowing now what you know and having experienced bullying throughout your school years, and now as an adult, and being more experienced, and have words of wisdom, what advice would you give to your young self if you could go back?
That's a great question. I think more parents need to ask themselves that. I think that the prevention of bullying starts with the parents and how they instill confidence in their kids. And something that I want to bring up is that no matter what age they are, although it's better to start young, younger is always better. When a child has self-confidence and self-worth, bullies don't stand a chance. They don't, because they cannot get to them, because they have such a hard, not a hard wall, but a hardened shell of that they feel that they're okay as a person they are, that whatever you say, it's not going to matter. And I think more parents need to focus on instilling self-confidence and self-worth into their child. And even just the simple thing of letting them know that no matter what you do in life, somebody's going to talk about you. Somebody's going to say something negative behind your back, to your face. Let them. And teach them that that is going to happen. Let's be realistic. It's going to happen. Even with our loved ones. Sometimes you're annoying. Sometimes you frustrate me. And I critique you, and maybe you critique me when I'm being dramatic, you say, but sometimes it's not dramatic. It's realistic. But it's just something that happens. That's just a part of life. But parents need to start being more realistic with their kids and telling them that whatever you do, somebody's going to say something. But it's up to you on whether you allow what they say to have control over what you do and how you feel.
This episode is sponsored by Aloha Imports, the sprays that make your worst smelling secrets disappear. Listen, I love people, but I don't love their shoes or their oops, I ate a burrito bathroom breaks. And I really don't love pretending I don't smell it. That's why I keep Aloha Imports products in the house, in my car, honestly, probably in every bag I own. They've got Sweet Feet for foot funk, Shoe Fly for that one pesky fly, Smoke Off for smoke clouds that linger like your last situationship, and Crapper Zapper for the bathroom situation. You know the one. Aloha Imports doesn't cover it up with flowers and lies. They end it, silently, like a tropical ninja with a vendetta. So if you live with roommates, pets, or anyone who eats food and then, processes that food, you need this. Go to alohaimports.com, stock up, and enjoy living in a house that doesn't smell like a regret.
I think a big part of that is, and I guess the proper question should have been, what advice should you give to your younger self? And, as a parent, think back to how would you have wanted your parent to handle that? And then sit down and come up with a plan together. So if we could go back and do it again, what I would have done is I would have been more inclusive in the process with you girls. I wouldn't have been so quick to just want to go and fight, but I would have asked, what do you want? How do you want to handle this? Now, I would take that input into consideration. Doesn't mean that it's going to be the route that's going to go, but I would take it in to see if we could possibly neutralize it without having it escalate. But then if not, taking it into, because once you see, here's the thing that I've learned is you got to kind of follow the chain of command, because if you go straight from the bottom to the top, you miss those steps that you could have possibly nipped it in the bud. And sometimes you can actually make it worse. So I think it's definitely first, confronting them, head on. I mean, every situation is going to be different, but trying to have you nip it in the bud. And then if not, maybe addressing it with their parents. And then if not, maybe with school. I mean, there's no right or wrong way. But I think there should be a little bit of a hierarchy. Oh, what's the fucking word I'm looking for?
Yeah, hierarchy.
Hierarchy of how we should follow it before you just go to the top. Because once you go to the top, it's like, it's exposed. It's out there. Everybody knows about it. And not that there's anything wrong with it. But I think we need to work through the different channels. But also in that, I think what comes in play is if, having those open conversations with your child, that communication, and letting them know that, hey, if you start to see that your child's starting to experience bullying, Get them involved in martial arts. Get them out in self-defense. It's that confidence. It's making them feel, the whole purpose for martial arts. And I know we had you girls in martial arts, and I participated in martial arts over the years. It's to build self-discipline and it builds confidence. It's not about going in and becoming a bully and being a fighter. No, it's showing you that you can handle yourself, that you're able to protect yourself if the need ever arises. But martial arts doesn't teach you about going and attacking people. It's about discipline. It's about staying within your confines and knowing that you're confident enough that, hey, if something does pop off, that you're going to be able to handle it. So
I definitely think that parents need to get their children involved in something, even if it's not martial arts. Although I'm biased because I, did a couple of years of karate, a couple of years of taekwondo. So I was in martial arts for, extended period of time. And that was something that helped boost my confidence, even though I was still subjected to bullying and I was a more quiet kid. I did feel a little bit more confident that if a fight had happened, that I at least had some type of backing to defend myself. But also, parents need to get their kids involved in anything, in sports, in their hobbies, and something, whatever it is that builds their self-confidence that they want to go after. Push them to go after that, but listen to them and help them build that self-confidence, because then they have something to look forward to. They have something that they're working towards.
is there, looking back, and I'll just use kind of your middle school or high school years, is there something that we could have done different as your parents to try to minimize or stop the bullying?
Middle school was difficult because we moved around a few different times. So I went to 3 different schools. I would say that is probably checking in more and not taking my bullshit responses of everything is fine. Because I will say middle school is the grade that you didn't know that the bullying was happening, because I was just unwilling to speak up because of embarrassment, of shame, because I had this outfall with these little girls, and then they kind of just outcasted me because I exited myself from a situation that I didn't feel comfortable with, and I got outcasted. And as it was hard enough to be the new kid, make friends, and then within that same year, that same year making friends, then being outcasted. And then, I just wanted to eat lunch by myself for the rest of the year.
It's funny you bring up this story because you went from, I was on a job assignment and we're living in San Clemente, literally right by the beach. Beach was our park every
Oh, it
day.
was beautiful.
And so it was a very affluent area. And then I took a new assignment in downtown LA. And then all of a sudden, I moved us to Southgate. And nothing wrong with Southgate, but at the time, you went to a school that was on the border of basically Watts, South LA, and Southgate. So it pulled from a whole different demographic. So here we come from San Clemente, very different demographic. And then all of a sudden, now you're in the hood. Let's just call it, you're in the hood.
No, we were.
And it was like Little Princess in the Hood. And I know that was an adjustment, and that created some bullying out because these girls were rough.
I was trying not to get my ass kicked.
Yeah.
I was trying to just keep my head down. Well, for
Didn't
me,
they have a nickname for you? Little Prissy Missy?
no,
No, okay.
but I did learn after I had a nickname in high school, and that was Rich Bitch, which that
Wow.
I didn't know until after. Which not that we were rich, we lived in a nice home, we were in a nicer community, and I guess just from being me, because I've always been the more graceful, shy little miss. I'll say little miss. There's nothing wrong with it, with being a little miss. And that was actually a nickname that they gave me behind my back that I didn't know.
Funny, rich bitch. Kind of fits you.
What? Doesn't? There's nothing wrong with carrying myself in a way that is comfortable to me.
No, not.
Just like I've said, sometimes people say, well, you seem high maintenance. You look high maintenance. I am high maintenance, but I take care of my own. I don't expect anybody else to do it for me, but that's just who I am. And I don't present myself that way. I don't think I'm better than everyone else. I'm just shy. I was just shy. I was anxious.
When we talk about, bullying a lot of times, you brought something up and you said, I wish you guys would have been so quick to accept my answers. When you ask how are things going, but dive deeper. And that brings up a point of, I think it's important for parents if their children are not open to share because of embarrassment, because of shame, because of whatever it is, I think it's important for the parents to talk to the friends that they do have from the neighborhood or even to the parents and use the parents as a tool. So maybe you have some neighborhood kids that go to the same school. Maybe they don't hang around as much, but maybe the parents go in and meet their neighbors and say, hey, I noticed, my daughter and your son are in the same class. Do you kind of know, can you ask your son like what's going on? And then you get the third party advice, the third party scoop of what's going on. Oh yeah, my son says, she doesn't really talk to anybody. She's by herself. Because here, you could be saying like, oh, everything's great. I sit down with my friends, and then I go and inquire with the neighbor, and the neighbor's kid says, oh no, she's alone or she's by herself.
Oh,
And
so
that gives
you're
the
you
whole.
speaking from experience? Because
I, I'm
as I learned last episode that you had neighborhood kids who would keep an eye on me.
I did, I did, and that's what kind of made me think about it. Is it's important for parents to do their own recon and to do their own research if they're not getting it from the kids, to go out and spend the time and put in the work and the research to investigate.
Oh, okay, I agree with that, but I would just be weary of not crossing the boundaries of now you're becoming invasive. Like I absolutely think, find out what's going on with your kids, but also just make sure you're not crossing the boundaries of like possibly, paying somebody to give you like updated notes every week or something like you did. So, but also not everybody's like you. So,
Well,
yeah, sure. Do your research on
I like
kids.
my data. So I was the early version of AI.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, but I do agree with that. I think that is a good tactic for parents to find out what's going on. But what about parents that don't have a community or who work all the time and don't have the time to go talk to somebody?
It's going to be just you're going to really have to build that trust and give that safe container for your children to be able to have these conversations. I know with one of your sisters, she was experiencing bullying, and I know with you, I was not so quick to want to pull you out of school, but with her, it's like, you know what, bullying had been, because where they went to school, there was a period in one school year a couple years ago where 5 kids committed suicide within like a 4-week period at Rancho Cucamonga High School.
Jeez.
Actually, I think it was between Rancho and Los Osos, but it was just in the last couple of years. It really happened where these kids committed suicide. And, so my fear was, well, if you're not comfortable there, then we need to get you out of there. We need to get you into another school. And whether it's into independent study, home study, continuation, or just into another school district, but let's get you out of there. Because the old me was like, no, you got to stick it out, suck it up, stop, stop being weak. But then you start to see like, it's a real issue. Kids are killing themselves. Like to a child that's being bullied, that's life or death sometimes. So I took a different tack, even though I wasn't on my spiritual journey, where it actually scared me enough to say, okay, if you don't want to be there, then because I know with pulling someone out of school, it can set them back in credits and classes. But sometimes what's more important, being caught up on credits, but risk losing your child in the process or falling behind a semester or two, but knowing that you're standing up and advocating for your kids. So, listen to your children, listen to what they're saying, because if they don't feel comfortable in that community, in that school, then let's put them into another school where they are going to feel safe, where they are going to feel comfortable.
You bring up a point. I actually want to ask you now, after learning everything that you've learned and going through now where my sister's at, my question to you is, would you have handled that situation differently? Would you have still been very quick to pull her out, or with having the knowledge that you have now, would you have tried to equip her with what you've learned and put pressure on schools and the parents of those bullies?
I would have done both. I would have done both. But I just think, each one of you is different. And the way we handled your situation was different than your sister's. And
I think that's a good point to bring up. Also, understanding parents have completely different children. No child is like the other, no matter how similar they are. So that's also something to consider. the handling bullying situations can be different between each child. And one thing that works for one child may not work for the other child. I grew up with the dad that said, you're going to have to stick it out. Even though you didn't know about some of the bullying, you're strong, you don't cry. And I was more mentally sound, but I had a different set of parents than my sisters did because they were in different places in their lives. And maybe if you have a child who's more sensitive or more strong, that should also dictate how you handle the bullying.
It's you're right. Parents can't rely on how they've solved one problem of bullying with, say, one child versus the other, because they're totally different people. One can be more in tune with their feelings. One can be more dismissive of their feelings. One can be so. Each child has to be handled differently. There's no cookie cutter approach. And when you were talking, it just reminded me of something. The world that we grew up in as parents doesn't exist anymore. Just like the world that you grew up in doesn't exist anymore, because technology is changing the dynamics of everything. It's changing how we live in this world of instant gratification now, where information is just literally fingertips away and nanoseconds away. And, with that, we can't parent our children on this topic of bullying on how we were parented because of all the new technologies and so forth that's come into play. Social media. And even like I said, when you were in school, social media was coming out, but now it's changed completely. Now you have these AI characters, or what are they called? You can make these characters up.
It's just AI characters.
AI characters. You can now take it to a whole different level.
Picture and
So the world is changing, and we have to keep up with technology too to figure out how we're going to continue to combat around this topic of bullying. But just as we start to any final thoughts that you have on, and I do want to go back and just say, I know we are starting to create a working document to be able to give us a guide. And can I share a little bit about what we talked about?
Yes.
So you came up with a brilliant idea of a checklist of the steps to follow if your child's being bullied, and something from the initial step of, interacting with the child, and then maybe reaching out to the parents, reach out to the teacher. So almost like a documented checklist to be able to follow the steps. So if it's not being addressed, you can go back and say, hey, principal, hey, superintendent, we followed all these steps and it's still not being resolved. We need your help. Because also if it's something that, if the law enforcement needs to get involved, if attorneys need to get involved, you want to be able to have that documentation and say, hey, we did everything we could in order to try to prevent it, and we're just not getting the cooperation. So I think that's going to be a powerful tool, is to be able to put that into play. But also, I think what we do, I've really given this some deep thought and meditation. And I think we also have to teach the kids to have that confidence where they can walk away from it. Walk away, because it's something I share with a lot of people that I'm coaching. I say, there is no argument if you choose to stay silent. If you choose not to participate, there is no. So what are they going to say? They're going to just talk about you. And if you don't react, eventually you're going to become a boring target.
I'm gonna challenge you a little bit on that, because I did do some research into bullying, and I did learn some tactics and techniques on how to handle bullies. I don't think necessarily it is that you stay silent and you walk away, because that can also promote a child who walks away from every situation. I think there needs to be more context behind that.
Okay.
Because then you're going to have adults that possibly just walk away from all confrontation with their partner, with their kids, with everything. I think that what really needs to be tackled is how you respond to the bully, and understanding the bully is trying to get a reaction out of you. And you don't want to give the bully that reaction. So maybe instead of just saying silent and walking away, saying, okay, why is that funny? Maybe gently challenging them on why that doesn't bother you, because then you're going to start tripping up the bully. I think maybe that being the first step, of not necessarily just saying, when you say silent, oh, just ignore it or just walk away. That sounds a little bit like your generation, right? You just walk away from it. But not necessarily walking away, just also putting up a strong front to understand that what that bully's trying to do, it's not getting to you, you
Okay.
know?
Yeah. So this is early stages for me because I'm still a strong advocate of punching someone in the
Yeah, I
nose.
know. We're working on that.
Um, you know, but I think also there has to be a point where it's enough and enough is enough. And
Oh, absolutely.
then you have to fight back, because if you don't fight back, then what happens is, the bullying, if it starts in elementary school, if you don't nip it in the bud, it goes into junior high school and it intensifies. And then you get more people that jump on the bandwagon because it's more cliquish. And if you don't shut it down, then it gets into high school, then it's just out of control at that point. So this shit's got to be nipped in the bud. And if it means that you get your ass whipped every day, but you're fighting to nip it in the bud, then so be it. And like I said, in no way am I advocating violence, but I'm saying, we're going to put some tools in place to try to go through the customary channels. But there's also a point where your child just has to stand up and defend himself, because how he shows up on that playground, how he shows up in the lunchroom, is going to be how they show up in life. And that's something.
And that starts with the parents. That starts with parenting. And even if parents do not have the words, then there are resources out there. There are videos, there's this podcast, there's different podcasts, there's all kinds of stuff.
And just as we start to close this out, I think you hit the nail on the head. Is parents don't accept just the cookie cutter answers when you ask your children. Ask open-ended questions. Dive deep into what's going on. Uh, Make a surprise visit. Go see, what's going on. Make sure that they're interacting, that they're in community. Make sure you're pushing your kids to get involved in sports or activities, because they'll find something. They'll find the community. Just like as adults, we're searching for community, so are our kids. They're, whether it's sports, or whether it's academic clubs, or yearbook, or photography, or key club, choir. Help them to find their community, is what I'm trying to say. Maybe your kids are more introverted, so maybe they're into band, and there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe that's their community. Or maybe so your children don't know. It's up to you as a parent to use your wisdom, your knowledge, to help them seek out the community, because there's a community for everybody. You just have to find it.
And if it doesn't exist, you just create it. Because I want to
Wow.
bring up that while in middle school, high school, and I'm sure that they still do it, that they would allow kids to create clubs. And if not, go be an advocate for them. Go to a PTA meeting, go to the school and say and see, because if your kid has that interest in, let's just say, anime, maybe an anime club doesn't exist, but I know it's been more popular. Help your kid create an anime club, because if they're into it, of course there's going to be other people that are. I remember I was in a beading club in middle school. That's something that was created because kids wanted to do it.
Wow. I love that. I love that. Any closing thoughts as we close out this episode 63 of bullying?
Provide your kids with the tools they need for empowerment in their life. And remember that this is their first community in their life. And unfortunately and fortunately, what happens in school tends to follow you throughout your life. So you really need to reflect on, how are you going to show up for your kids as you're being called to at this point in their life? And how do you want them to show up as adults? Because they're smarter than you think they are, and they pay attention to more things than you think that they do, and they're exposed to more things than you think that they are. So really provide them with tools to become self-efficient, self-confident.
I like that. And with this checklist, could really help. And then just in closing, if you've done everything and you've done the notifications and you try to stop the bully, and just make sure your hand is strong and you close your fist tightly. And when you throw that right fist and punch him in the nose, keep it tight so you don't break your hand. And that's it's Fatherhood Voices episode 63. Sometimes you just got to knock a bully out.
I ain't gonna oppose that.